Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing a video that I have done every year that I've had my channel, and it is the mid-year book freakout tag. I absolutely love this tag, and I love that everybody does it year after year. It's very old school booktube, and I'm so here for it, and I'm so glad to participate again this year. All of the questions written down, and we're gonna go through them, and there is a pup behind me, so if you hear chewing or anything, that's Miss Indie Girl. First question is, what is the best book you've read so far this year? And at this point in time, the best book I've read so far this year is The Frozen River by Ariel Lahan. This is a historical fiction, and I was so surprised that I loved this because this is a little bit further back in history than I usually like. It's set in 1789, and it's based off of real events. The Ballard was a real midwife, and she kept a journal, and this book is a fiction based off of her journals, which I think is really cool. But she basically is a midwife in this small town in Massachusetts. But since she was the midwife, she kind of became like the nurse and the doctor. So she knew a lot of what went on in the little town. And she has to help put a man behind bars who's accused of rape. But during the whole process, the man is found dead in the frozen river. So she is having to use her journals and her memory and her knowledge of medicine to help people in the town and to bring justice to all of the horrible things that happen to the women in this town. I loved the characters. I loved the character development. I loved her husband. This kind of reminded me a little bit of Outlander. She's a midwife and the time of year. There's no like magical realism to it, but she also, her husband very much reminds me of Jamie Fraser or Sully from Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, and just the kind-hearted man that's very ahead of his times in that he's not trying to control his wife. He, you know, kind of goes along with her antics and kind of knows that's just how she is. I just loved everything about this. I read this during the Backlist Readathon, so I do talk about it in a vlog. So I would say that if you like historical fiction, don't let the time period scare you. It definitely doesn't seem as old as it is. This question is, what is the best sequel you've read? And I don't really read series, so I don't really have necessarily a sequel, but I am going to talk about Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez because these are like companion novels. So this is from the part of your world, so to speak. So you can read them out of order. You really can. But this one in particular, you see a lot of different characters from Yours Truly and Part of Your World. And it's almost like you revisit them, which is kind of cool. So this definitely does spoil the other two books. But I mean, let's be honest, romances are romances, right? You kind of know what's going to happen in the end. So is it really a spoiler? I don't know. But I definitely would say don't read this one first. Read Part of Your World and then Yours Truly, but I mean, you could read them out of order if you really wanted to. About Emma and Justin, and they both have this curse that they will date somebody, and then after they break up, the next person that person dates becomes their soulmate. So they decide to date each other to kind of counteract that. And Emma is a traveling nurse, and she was a foster child, and so her foster sister travels with her. So there's a lot of trauma and abusive parents and things like that in here. So definitely check trigger warnings. And Justin is about to become the primary caregiver for his siblings, so they have to kind of delve through that as well. But it's just so atmospheric. I never really think, oh my gosh, I want to go to Minnesota, other than when I read these books. Abby Jimenez romanticizes Minnesota in all the best ways, and I see so much of myself in Emma and her struggles and the things that she's had to go through and learn from, and the way she processes her trauma and her PTSD. So I just can't say enough good things about this book. Abby Jimenez does try to tackle a lot in her books, but she ends up doing everything a really good amount of justice, which I appreciate. So definitely try this one out. Question 3 is, what is a new release that you have not read yet but want to? Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. And I actually, at the time I'm filming this, I'm going to be meeting him next week. I'm going to an author event, and I'm going to get a copy of his book, and I'm going to get it signed, and I'm going to meet him and hear him talk about his book, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited. And I have actively avoided reading the synopsis for this book or watching anything about it because I want to go in totally blind with just Riley Sager giving me knowledge about it going into it. Question number 4 is, what is your most anticipated read for the second half of the year? And for this, I'm going with House of Glass by Sarah Pekkanen. I read her book Gone Tonight last year, which was her first book that she did separate from Greer Hendricks, and I prefer her writing so much more when it's just Sarah Pekkanen. So if you kind of liked Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen together, I think you'll love Sarah Pekkanen on her own. And she's from the DMV, so I love that I always know what she's talking about in her books, and I've been to a lot of the places that she talks about, and this is set in the DC area. I think it's kind of like an evil child trope, and I'm so here for it, and I know that there's like courtroom drama and stuff too. The synopsis reminds me of Jodi Picoult if she wrote pure thrillers, so I'm so excited for it. And I do have the e-galley on NetGalley, so hopefully I'll get to that one pretty soon, but it comes out I think mid-August. Number 6 is the biggest surprise that I read this year, and the most surprising book so far has been Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. This one snuck up on me. I got it as an advanced listener copy from Libro FM, and my friend Jessie read it, and I haven't loved Geneva Rose in the past, but I knew it would be like a popcorn thriller, something I would be able to get through really quickly, and so I listened to it on my way to the beach, and I absolutely loved it. It's about 3 siblings who are kind of settling their mother's affairs after she passes away, and they find this tape with this secret on it that has to do with a mystery that happened in their town in the 90s. And so you have the present day timeline, and you have these 3 adult siblings trying to navigate what that looks like being adult siblings, which I can definitely relate. I have 5 siblings. And then the past timeline has some of the best 90s vibes I've ever read in a book. I feel like whenever a book is set in the 90s, sometimes it like tries too hard with throwing in things from the 90s that people can relate to. And then other times it's like you wouldn't even know that it was in the 90s. But this was the perfect blend. It was the perfect mix, the perfect blend of 90s nostalgia without being too much. And it was gritty, it was dark, it was fast paced. Was it an earth-shattering twist that I never would have seen coming? No, but I just had such a good time, and I initially rated it 4 stars when I read it, but I think it's moving up to a 5-star. And I just did not expect that after giving every other Geneva Rose book that I've read 3 stars. And I don't even hear that many people talking about it, so I think more people need to read this book. Next is your favorite new to you author. So this could be a debut author or just somebody that it's the first time you've read from that author. I don't think I've read any debuts yet this year, but I definitely enjoyed this one, The Clinic by Kate Quinn. Even though it's a chunker of a book, it really didn't feel that long. And I read this for my friend Jessie's book club, the Sleep When I'm Dead book club, and it was really good. It has a little bit of like asylum-y vibes because they're in this old clinic. It's this fancy clinic that people pay a lot of money to go for addiction. And Meg goes there in search of answers because her sister Haley supposedly died while at the clinic. And this was a slow burn, but I never felt bored. It was about as fast-paced as a slow burn thriller can be, if that makes any sense. And it was really interesting. It was very ominous and like tense. And I really liked the characters and the character development. I felt like all of the characters were really well thought out. And so I definitely will read more from this. And I think she has a couple of others. I know she has a book called Black Widows that I am interested in and will hopefully get my hands on pretty soon. Question number 8 is, who is your fictional crush? And I'm gonna go with Justin from Just for the Summer. He is smart, he is caring, he is funny. He sent pre and post date surveys, which I think is honestly such a great idea because then you don't have to wonder about what the person is thinking, what they wanna do. You can just ask them and you can make sure that it's a date that meets both of your expectations. So I just really enjoyed his character, and he wasn't like, he didn't feel like he had to be overly macho. He was like in touch with his emotions, but he also wasn't like wimpy. I don't know, I just really like Justin's characters. I always really like Abby Jimenez male characters. Although they do sometimes give me unrealistic expectations of men, but that's a whole different story. Question number 9 is your favorite character. And so I'm gonna go with Alice from Magic Hour. So Alice is a child in this book, and this book is about 2 sisters. One is a detective and the other is a psychiatrist. And the detective finds this child, this feral child, that's literally how she's described. She is living in the woods, she is unkempt, she can't talk. She acts very animalistic and she doesn't know a whole lot. So the detective calls on her sister, who is a psychiatrist, who has some trauma of her own, and she and Alice just become this like found family, and she teaches her how to talk and how to express herself and how to get her needs met in a safe manner. And this book was so spot on because I do work in psychiatric residential treatment with individuals just like Alice. This is spot on. Usually books like this are not very realistic to what actually happens and the actual trauma and the cold hard truth of interacting with individuals that have the amount of trauma that Alice does, but this was spot on. Like, if you had told me that Kristen Hanna was a child trauma psychiatrist, I would have believed you. She obviously did so much research. You know, that like Kristen Hanna storytelling with the knowledge of Lucinda Berry. That's what this was like. And this book was just so good. And Alice as a character is such an amazing character, and she goes through so much, and she's so smart and such a resilient character. So yeah, Alice seems to bring out the best in people, and I love that about her. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry, and I'm going back to Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose, which is crazy. You would never think of this as a sad book or a book to make you cry, but the very first chapter is of one of the siblings taking care of the mother in her final days, and it is very, very emotional and very graphic and very detailed about the passing of her mother. And it was really tough. And when I read it, I was like, Jessie, you didn't warn me. And like, she did kind of warn me. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's sad, but like, it's not gonna affect me. Oh, it affected me. And then chapter 2 affected me. I cried like 2 or 3 times in the first third of this book. So yeah, that book, I think that's the only one so far this year that I've cried. But yeah, whew. That first chapter, just make sure you go in prepared. Number 11 is a book that made you happy. And with that, I'm going with Funny Story by Emily Henry. This one, it literally just made me happy. It was just fun. Is it a perfect book? No, I could probably pick it apart if I want to, but I just really liked the normalcy of the relationship. I loved the friendships in this book. I liked the banter. I liked the atmosphere. I just liked everything about it. And it just made me feel like warm and fuzzy, like a rom-com is supposed to. So it just made me so happy. Next you have Daphne and Miles, and they both end up living together because they were both dumped by their exes, and then those exes started dating. So they both find themselves living together, and it starts out as just kind of friends, they're friendly, and then they do a little bit of fake dating to make their exes jealous, and then it's like a forced proximity. So like there's a lot of different tropes going on here. And Daphne works at a library, and she has this friend that just, their friendship is just so awesome. I love seeing healthy adult female friendships, and they're in different phases of life, but that's okay. They figure it out anyways. And Daphne learns a lot about what it means to have a lasting female friendship, as well as what it means to have a healthy relationship. And I really like Miles as a character. I could do without the Crocs, but they can't all be perfect, right? And just the way Abby Jimenez is able to romanticize Minnesota, I feel like Emily Henry romanticized Michigan for me. And this is just a feel-good book that is gonna make you feel happy. Number 12 is a book to film adaptation. The only one I've read this year has been Foe by Ian Reid, and I haven't actually watched the movie yet, but I know that it is a movie, so I need to get on that pretty soon. This is a pretty short sci-fi about Junior and Henrietta, and one day a man shows up at their remote farm and says, hey, we need you to be part of this government project, and it kind of goes from there, and I'm not gonna tell you anything else. It's a little bit weird, but not like super weird. It's a little bit sci-fi, but just a tiny bit, and it was my type of tiny bit of sci-fi, and I did give it 4 stars, and I really enjoyed it. So definitely gonna have to watch the movie, but if you haven't picked up Ian Reid, don't be afraid. I feel like sometimes people are afraid of Ian Reid books because of like, I'm thinking of ending things like that, but I loved We Spread so much, and I really enjoyed this one as well. So I am gonna try and give I'm Thinking of Ending Things a chance, but I feel like a lot of people read that one and then wrote off Ian Reid, so definitely look into this, and hopefully I watch the movie soon. Number 13 is the most beautiful book you've acquired this year, and I think that's The Frozen River. This book was sent to me by a lovely friend and subscriber, and it's just so gorgeous. I just think this is a beautiful book, and the spine is just so beautiful. And then last we have number 14, and that's the book that I need to read by the end of the year. And I don't have just one, because I do have about 50 unread books on my shelf, which to me is a lot. That's a lot to me. I know to some people that's not a lot, but I try to keep all of my unread TBR to like 2 shelves. And right now it's like 2 shelves and like a couple on top and a couple sitting next to it. So I really need to get to work on reading some of my owned books. But I also especially need to read the ones that are gonna self-destruct in December if I don't read them. So I did a video during Vlogmas of books that I have to read before the end of next year, otherwise I have to unhaul them. So I need to go back to that video and look at that list and see how many I've read, how many I've unhauled, and make sure I make those a priority. So when I get to December, I can give you a lovely update of all those books being gone and not being forced to unhaul them just because I didn't get to them. Yeah, that was my mid-year book freakout tag. Let me know down in the comments below. I would love to hear any of your answers to any of these questions. Please hit that subscribe button, it really helps out my channel, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.